Hello everybody, this is Niclas Huschenbeth, and today I would like to share with you what I call humbly my perfect game. So why is that? Well, I looked at this game afterwards with the computer and turned out that with every single move pretty much I made one of the top 3 recommendations of the computer, and to be honest that just never happens. So I decided to call it my perfect game, and I would like to share with you right now. So I played against international master Matthias Dann in the 7th round of the Pfalz Open 2017. And I was playing with the white piece, and let's get started. So out with e4, and he went for a Sicilian, and here he surprised me, went b6, which is an unusual move in this position. I went d4, c takes, knight takes d4, bishop b7, knight c3, and now a6. And that is pretty much necessary. If black goes e6 here, then I can go knight d to b5, and there's the idea of knight d6. There's also a threat of bishop f4, and this is quite good for white already. So a6, and now it took some time. And I realized I had looked at this position before, briefly only, of course, because nobody had ever played it against me. If I was to play normally, let's say bishop e2 or bishop e3, then it's just a normal Sicilian. And really I can't exploit the fact that black has chosen this rather unusual setup early with b6. But there is a way to do so, and eventually I found it. Well, I kind of half remembered what I looked at, and that's to move bishop g5. So the point is first of all hindering black to develop. Of course this pawn cannot move now because it's pinned, and knight f6 either could take with a favorable pawn structure for white, or I think e5 looks also quite strong. So queen c7 is the natural reply. c7 is typically the best square for the queen in the Sicilian, and now trying to follow up with e6. So white has to act very concretely, and that's possible with knight d5. Attacking the queen, my opponent played queen e5. If bishop takes d5, then I take back, and now queen e5 would transpose to the game. And if black doesn't play that, well, I'm just going to stabilize with c4 after bishop pair, more space, just a great position for white to play. So queen e5 is forced. Now black's threatening bishop and pawn, but I can just go back to e3, and black cannot take on e4. It's not with check anymore, so I have knight c7 forking the king and the rook. So my opponent took on d5. There's really not much else he can do. If e6, I don't take on b6 immediately because of queen a5 check, picking up the knight, but I go knight f3 first, queen d6, and now knight takes b6 would be strong, but probably even stronger is bishop f4, followed up by knight c7, and white is clearly better. So bishop takes d5 is forced. E takes, queen takes, and bishop e2. Now if queen takes g2, I can play bishop f3, and I defend my rook and win his rook on a8. So he played e5, which makes a lot of sense, because if black doesn't take the queens off the board, he will have a very hard time developing. I have a huge lead in development, I have the bishop pair, so black needs to do this. e5, and now I went knight f5, queen takes d1, rook takes d1. This position I had envisioned when I went for his pawn sacrifice, and white has excellent compensation here. Better developed bishop pair, weak pawns, and a nice knight, and annoying knight for black on f5. So knight c6, and now I don't want to take on b6 because black could win back this pawn on b2, and I just castle. Knight f6, and here I found this, what I think very nice maneuver, is going bishop f3, now threatening, for example, to take on c6, followed by taking on b6. And it's also difficult for black to make any kind of move. I think I looked at g6, but here I can always reply nicely. Well, knight d6 is also nice, but I think bishop g5 is quite strong. G takes f5, bishop takes f6, rook g8, and now I thought, oh, just bishop takes e5, exactly, because the knight is pinned. and it's just a mess. I've regained the pawn, bishop pair, all pawns are isolated and weak. It's just pretty much game over for black. So e4 is what my opponent played, and I just went back. And what did this do for me that I provoked this move e4? Well, the dark squares are now even more weakened, and this pawn being on e4 is also more accessible for me. More easily I can win it maybe in the future. And it's really difficult to find any kind of decent move here for black. Still, there's this idea of bishop g5 in a position. Oh, actually, this was another point. So if I was to go bishop g5 here, black could answer with knight e4. But now that the pawn is on e4, black can't do this anymore, and bishop g5 is quite an unpleasant threat. I was actually expecting b5, and now I could go bishop g5, and black can't allow me to take on f6, so he needs to go knight g8, which is of course a very sad move to play. And here maybe one way to play would be to go c4, b4, rook fe1, and obviously white is doing very, very fine here. So my opponent played h6, stopping bishop g5, and now went a4. And what is kind of funny is that my opponent told me afterwards that he had prepared up to this point 16 moves for white in an earlier game against a strong grandmaster, which actually didn't happen on the board. But he had known this whole line, but he just didn't know how to deviate from it. So he played b6 hoping I wouldn't know this line of bishop g5, because then I guess it's very playable for black. But I did. So just, yeah, must have been really, really uncomfortable for him playing all these moves, or and knowing that the position is just really difficult for black already. So what is the point of a4? Well, I'm stopping b5, and also I'm threatening to take on b6 followed by a5. So let's say black plays some move. I don't know, rook g8. Now I can just take on b6 and then protect my bishop. And what if black plays g6 now? Well, then I can just go knight d6. And here, this is also just so sad, because the dark squares are incredibly weak. All the pawns are weak. It's just not a position you want to play. But probably there's not much for black to do anyway. It might be just lost at this point already, in fact. So let's see what happened in the game. d5, bishop takes b6, now g6, knight e3, going after this pawn, which black cannot really protect. So he went d4 to at least get my bishop. But I didn't mind giving up the bishop for another pawn. And now I have a really nice queenside majority here. Bishop e7. And we have opposite colored bishops on the board, and I decided to fix this pawn on a6 by going a5 to fix it as a weakness, so black has to keep defending it. Now castle, and now I just push my pawns forward, b4. Because you see that my pieces are very nicely placed already. I don't need to do anything else here. I just want to push them forward. Rook fc8. And now I went rook b1, preparing maybe c4, followed by b5, or something along these lines. And also asking black what he's going to do. I could also improve my king position, obviously, if I want to. So he went rook c3. And I needed to exchange his active rook. I went rook c4. Takes, takes. And now bishop d6. And here I went back with the bishop to open up c4 again, to push these pawns forward. Now rook b8. c3, I need to protect this pawn. I want to keep my pawn chain as it is. Now this pawn a6 is hanging. We went bishop e5. Now I don't want to take on a6 because after bishop takes c3, it's not easy to keep going here. And you know, you can still mess this up, obviously, especially with opposite colored bishops is tricky. So I went rook c1, just defending the pawn. Why didn't I go rook b3 again? Oh yeah, after rook b3 there's knight d7, threatening knight c5, and I would need to go rook a3, and just didn't look right to me. So rook c1, now the pawn is hanging again on a6, and here he played actually rook c8. But now I took anyway, because with the rooks off the board there's a forced line directly where I can win a piece. And I go knight c2, defend the pawn, and also importantly take away the d4 square from the bishop. And now my pawn is ready to roll. Knight d5, and it's just in time. Bishop b7, knight takes b4, and now if I was to take on b4 it's a draw, because the bishop could defend the a7 square. But I go a6, and black has no way to stop the pawn in a sensible manner, so he has to give up the knight. And he did. Now f5. And this you still need to win this somehow. Fortunately for me, there was a way to do it rather directly. In this position, I could go g4 and break up the pawn chain here. Because I think if I go, for example, h4, with the idea to go h5, this position will still take some time to win. I'm pretty sure it is winning, but it will take some time. Probably I need to put my knight on h3 and then move closer with the king. Something along these lines. This will still be maybe some technical difficulties. Anyways, with g4, I can break up the pawn chain because king f6 runs into knight d5. So my opponent played f4. If f takes g4, I take with the knight. h5, I move back, and I'm going to win this pawn on e4, and then slowly but surely win. So you went f4, I went knight g2, now bishop d2, bishop b7, e3, and here I took on e3. Just had to verify that this is not a draw. Well, I don't have to take, but this is also winning. Just have to make sure I don't get this pawn exchange, because then it's a draw. I have the wrong bishop. But yeah, just king g2 here. Yeah, I think I looked at this line, king f6, now threatening king g5 followed by h5. So h4, king e5, king f3, e2, takes, king f4, bishop d7, h5. Now I have to keep the pawn, like I said, g5, king g3, but now this is winning. I keep the pawn, that's all that matters. And then, oh, hold on, that's a stalemate. What? Let me do this differently. Okay, I think I have to go here. Bishop f3, this way, that's the right way. So always be careful. Yeah, now it's not a stalemate. I'll go after this pawn and I win. Okay, there we go. Anyways, he took with the pawn on e3, and now I also went h4, and here he actually resigned. Because, well, e2, I just played king f2, and after king f6, I just approach the pawn, and yeah, that's it. I'm going to put my king here, take on e3, and will win eventually. All right, that was my game against international master Matthias Dann. Let me know if you have any questions about this game, and also if you want to, I've recorded more game analysis of this tournament, of the Pfalz Open, and you can find them in the description, so you can check them out. And then I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.